Well, my mother-in-law is forcing me to marry her younger son. I know what you're thinking. How is she my mother-in-law if I haven't married him yet? Well, that's because I'm married to her older son. That's right, her eldest. Well, unfortunately, he's passed away in an accident. So now that she wants me to marry the younger one, it seems a little weird. But when I fill you in on these crazy gaps of this story, you'll figure out exactly why she's doing it.
If I recall my childhood, then I have nothing but good memories. My family consisted of my mother, father, me, and my older sister. We were a happy family of 4, but my life changed a lot when my sister passed, and we were left behind with nothing but memories. So after her death, my parents started to show me even more affection. They would let me do whatever I wanted and spoil me a lot. But she made sure to discipline me, so I would not grow up to be a total brat. I always listened to them and made sure to never disappoint them. So they reciprocated that energy and never scolded me or anything. They made sure to give me everything I wanted and enroll me in a prestigious college, and that's where I met Chris. He was an exchange student at my college and originally belonged to Bulgaria. We became friends and we got close. It was Chris who then confessed to me and we started dating. For the first time in my life, I found somebody who was treating me right and gave me lots of love and affection, so it was not a surprise that we got pretty serious about each other. His being a foreigner in my country did raise suspicions about his intentions, so my parents thoroughly questioned him whenever he would visit me. My parents were against our relationship in the beginning, but his good behavior and willingness to eventually, made them accept him. They were apprehensive of him getting into a relationship with me and considered him greedy to get settled in Britain with me. But Chris made it clear that he wasn't with me for any of those reasons. My parents had made a plan to scare him off at first. They invited him over to the house, started to insult him, and tried to make him break up with me. They even cut off our contacts and made me stay away from him, which resulted in a lot of arguments between us. But Chris was determined to change their mind and did not give up. He would show up at our house, buy gifts for them, and even started helping my dad with business. So slowly they accepted our relationship and no longer had problems with it. We dated for a year before Chris proposed marriage to me, and I gladly accepted. Our wedding was held in England, and Chris's family came here to attend it. His family wasn't big, it was just his mom and brother. Everything went great, but the issue started after our wedding when we had decided where to buy a house. Chris had informed me even before the wedding that he saw his future in his own country and that he would not be moving here any sooner. I had no problem with it, but I was aware that my parents would certainly not like it. And that's what happened. It was a week after our marriage, and that's when we decided to break the news to my parents. My parents had invited us to a congratulatory dinner, and we were all sitting there happily chit-chatting. Chris was the one who calmly brought up the subject. My parents immediately tensed up, realizing where the conversation was headed. Before Chris could even complete a sentence, Dad jumped at his feet and muttered, "No!" But Chris wasn't ready to let it go. So he stood up too and tried to make him understand. But with each passing moment, Dad was getting more and more aggressive, and out of nowhere, he punched Chris. I was shocked, since he wasn't the type to raise his voice. Mom jumped in too, and within seconds, the fight escalated. Dad started to drag Chris out of the house, and I was trying to stop them. After this fight, Chris did not even talk to me for a day, and I had to make sure that Dad would never do this again. So after constant persuasions and insistence, Chris agreed to meet my parents. Before their meeting, things were not easy even on their side. My parents were adamant about not letting me out of their sight and were even ready to risk my marriage for the sake of keeping me close to them. And that's when I stepped forward and told them that the condition was told to me clear, even before marriage, since Chris has a living condition there. He owns an estate and wants to expand his business there. So it wasn't possible for him to just up and abandon his estate and move here. And I was the one who agreed to all this and had no problem moving to his country. Well, this aggravated Mom, and she slapped me, crying as she screamed at me for being selfish and leaving them alone. She cried and refused to eat any food, and she fought with me a lot to divorce him if I had to leave everything behind just for him. After lots of arguments, fights, and a ton of crying, I was able to make them agree to let me go. So Chris finally arrived at my parents' house, and Mom and Dad did not come to welcome him. But thankfully, Chris did not think much of it. Finally, they had a peaceful dinner, and my parents agreed to it after putting in a condition that I would come to meet them every few months. And that's how I left my homeland and moved to a completely new country with my husband. My in-laws, who had shortly departed after attending our wedding ceremony, were not even in the sight at the airport. Chris's mom had called him to let him know that they were specifically coming to welcome the bride, but when we reached there, we got a call that something urgent happened and that they could not come. So my first impression of them was not very good. But I decided to let it go, giving it the benefit of the doubt. But no matter how wrong I was, they proved it to me later on. Anyways, when Chris took me to his estate, I was bewildered by how vast the land was and how big business was. He was a wealthy businessman, and he totally did not act like it. He was humble and down to earth, and even when he approached me, I had no idea how much wealth he had. Initially, I had no idea about the family dynamics, but later on, I learned how messed up everything was. Chris's mother was not at all the sweet lady she pretended to be, and his brother was a complete loser who would cause trouble for him every now and again. It was not a surprise that they were living with Chris on his estate. I had no problem with them whatsoever, as it was his family, but I had no idea that they would have lots of problems with me living there. In the beginning, I tried to get along with him. My mother-in-law drew a clear line and gave me lots of trouble. Every day she would make sure to give me a headache. It started with her always fighting with me over my routines and how bland my food was. I tried to change the servants who did not work properly, and this resulted in a big fight. She insulted me in front of all of them and later invited her friends to laugh about it. Chris was pretty aware of how toxic his mother was and proposed the idea of buying a separate place for me, but I refused it. I liked the estate and the facilities. Besides, I was not going to move away because of her, so whatever hell she gave me, I pretty much endured it. One day, the woman threw a party at the house and invited her friends. I had no idea people were coming, and I was feeling under the weather. And I'd made the chef go buy some groceries for me, and this made her mad. She started screaming and yelling at me in front of the guests, and she called me a witch for bewitching her son. That day, Chris intervened and had to later seek out everything. He made it clear to her that he married me on his own and that I should not be blamed for anything. And I thought that maybe the way her evil schemes would stop. But I was very wrong. But this time, her son was the one who added to our worries. Chris was out of town for some business when it happened. Noah, his brother, came home and marched straight towards his mom, who was right there sitting in the living room. I was up in my room, yet I could hear their loud voices and shattering noises from whatever objects he was throwing. I hesitantly went downstairs and saw Noah, angry, while his mother, instead of calming him down, was hyping him up even more. I wanted to stop him, but it was better for me to stay away from the trouble, so I did not move from my spot. He starts yelling as he talked about how bad his boss was and how he insulted him. It was not something new since Noah slacked off a lot at work and his boss every other day would scold him. But this time, seeing his disheveled state, it's pretty clear that the fight wasn't just with words. His bloody nose was a clear indication, and Noah was talking about how his friends came to bail him out, but Chris did not come, so I spoke up and maybe I should not have. I told him that Chris had a meeting with his investors and did not have time for this. The moment I said that, both my mother and son started throwing shade at me, saying that now an outsider's going to tell them what to do and what not to do. I knew defending myself was of no use in front of them, so I just started walking away. Well, this made even more annoyed, and they started talking even angrier and throwing random objects as they cursed me out. I called Chris, and after 20 minutes he rushed home. Before he could even talk to me, Noah and my mother-in-law start crying and throwing tantrums. Poor Noah lost his job today as he himself quit. I could hear them spit lies and crocodile tears just to prove themselves innocent. They started talking about how I made fun of him and all kinds of made-up nonsense just to prove themselves right. What I expected was Chris would ask me about it, but what I thought was his tired and long face when he came upstairs and just sat at the edge of the bed. I tried asking him about work, but he didn't say anything and just kept quiet. I could guess that there was something going on in his head, and he wasn't ready to share it. After that, Noah starts taking even more money from Chris, as he did not work at all, and his mother, as usual, starts to waste even more money on superficial items. However, there was a change in Chris's attitude. He did tell me it's because of his work, and a lot of investors were pulling out because of his brother's reputation, because of the ongoing tension in our household, and we even had to cancel our trip that we planned to visit my parents back in Britain. I knew my parents were angry at my time since then, and I broke my promise and did not even contact them. But the reason was that after landing in Bulgaria, I couldn't even reach out to them. I tried calling them, but maybe because of their anger, they declined my calls. And I knew I only had to go and visit them in order to pacify it. But Chris said that he's been really busy these days, and he would do things when work gets better. He would accompany me to go back. Little did I know that this one statement of his was never going to come true, no matter what. Update number 1. So what happened was, it was Sunday morning and we were all having breakfast when suddenly Chris had a call and he had to leave because of an urgent meeting with one of his clients. I was busy picking up the leftovers and cleaning the table when my mother-in-law came to me and started questioning me about my spending. I get angry and told her to just leave me alone, since I never ask her questions about it. She starts reminding me that it was her son's money and I should be grateful for them to even allow me to live here. I don't know what came into me, I just lost my calm, and in return told her that it was my husband's house, and they were the ones who were leeching off of him, and they should be held responsible for his headaches. Just when I said this, my mother-in-law charged towards me and hit me in the face. I was so shocked to react. I started shivering and got scared since my parents never even raised their voice at me. And the woman just hit me so hard. Just when I thought she would stop, she slammed the plates on the table, picked up a few more plates, and started throwing them down on the ground. I had no idea what the woman was doing in anger, but I ran to my room and locked myself in there. I tried calling Chris, but he wasn't coming home. So I had no idea what was happening outside my room and stayed in there for I forgot how many hours. There was nobody else with me in the house since I saw my mother-in-law leaving the house in the evening time. But Chris was still not home, so I just came home and started making food for myself. And I had been hungry for quite a long time in my room. I was in the kitchen making food when I received a call from an unknown number. I had no idea who it could be, but I never picked it up, and that's when I got the news that literally broke my heart and made me speechless, and I could not even react after what I heard. It was a man who told me that Chris has had an accident after coming out of his office, and that his car collided with a truck in the past. He got seriously injured because the wounds were deep, so he could not fight the battle. He lost it and expired even before he could reach the hospital. The news of this demise was so sudden and unexpected that I could even not believe what I've heard for a few minutes, and then it dawned upon me and I started to cry and shouted like a mad woman. Hearing me, she ran to me and starts asking me questions about what happened, and that was the day when my world changed forever. Update number 2. It was hard to digest the fact that Chris was no more, and I was left all alone in a foreign country with nothing but my toxic in-laws. Also, I was so sad and lost that I had no idea what deals were done behind closed doors, and I was just busy mourning the death of my husband. No matter what, I had no idea what was happening around me. I was just blinded by pain. My parents could not come to the funeral because they could not get the tickets on time. So when a month passed after his death, my parents were the ones who started taking notice of the activities of my mother-in-law and brother-in-law. Auntie suggested I move back to pretend and leave everything behind, including thoughts and everything else. In the beginning, I did not want to leave. I felt like I was betraying my dead husband, but in the end I realized how toxic things were done to me by my mother-in-law. She had even started to meet the business partners trying to get his money, and that's when Chris's lawyer showed up and told us that he actually had a will written before he died. According to his words, he made me the sole owner of his property and estate in case anything happened. My mother-in-law was livid upon hearing that. She threw the biggest tantrum ever, claiming that it was fake and all that just to get a share of the property. But it was Chris's lawyer who explained that Chris himself handed it over immediately after our wedding, and yes, it was legitimate. And that he had all kinds of original documents. So, rather than making an issue out of this, it's better to just accept the truth. So after that was announced, I also had to take care of his estate, and I had to think about what to do with all the business he had in Bulgaria. I knew I couldn't live like that. I was still in the process of deciding what to do. I was in my room when my mother-in-law just barged in there and started crying and wailing. I got so confused, I asked what happened, and she said that she lost her son, and now I'll leave. It's like she would lose another part of her son, so if she wanted me to stay, she had to marry me off to her younger son, Noah, and she's ready to do it. Noah? I got so mad hearing that, I just started yelling at her to leave me alone, never talk to me again about such, and say anything like that to me, since I've considered that extremely disrespectful to her older son, who just died a month ago. It wasn't something that was impossible to happen, since my mother-in-law was a total psycho. I could expect such a thing from her, but again, I was too upset to think about it rationally. I just knew I would never do that. Update number 3. Hey guys, after my fight with my mother-in-law, I started thinking of ways to get out of where I'm at, and what I should do with my mother-in-law and Noah. But what bothered me the most was why she wanted me to marry her younger son, Noah, and why not? I was agreeing to marry me so easily when we just hated each other's guts. Weird. And that's when your ultimate plan was exposed. I mean, duh. It was Sunday evening, and my mother-in-law was having a small tea party with her friends, and I was busy upstairs with the paperwork. I've been taking care of him since Chris's death. I felt thirsty, and usually I would not come downstairs for anything when either of them would be home, but I was so dehydrated and decided to fetch a glass of juice. That's when I overheard the conversation of my mother-in-law with her friends, and Theo, one of her friends, was asking why she wanted me as a girl. She hated me so much to stay in the house and marry Noah, and me and my mother-in-law, telling her that I was made the owner of the estate and now they were dependent on me for the money. So Noah and she just made a plan that they would marry Noah to me after getting the money from me. They would just divorce me out of the estate. Her words made my blood boil, but I knew how I should treat such a loser, and I should come up with a better way to teach them a lesson. So the whole night I thought about it and eventually came up with a plan. And that was to apparently agree with the wedding. And that's what I did the next morning. I told her that I was ready for the marriage after I changed my mind, and she was so shocked after hearing what I said. She was too happy to even question my intentions or care about it. So that's how she started preparing for my wedding with Noah and me. Meanwhile, I was trying to get out of the country as fast as possible after selling the whole estate and transferring the business to Britain. Update number 4. Final update of the story. So, what I did was, as the wedding days was coming near, I started to contact more and more people who wanted to buy my estate. I started contacting investors and informing them of the transfer of the business. Since my parents were aware of my plan, they helped me out a lot to take care of everything on such short notice, and helped me back out of the whole business from Bulgaria and take it to Britain. After I agreed, my mother-in-law became really sweet. There was a 180-degree turn in my mother-in-law's attitude. She suddenly started treating me nicely and started to be friendly with me. And Noah was suddenly all over me, and I was really just disgusted by them. I tried to hide it and pretend like I was doing whatever they wanted and I had no problem with it. She starts treating me like she actually cared about me, but I knew that she was doing it because she wanted me to hand over the property to her. I acted like a deaf and dumb person the whole time Noah and his mother-in-law were planning to kick me out and get rid of me while they would become the sole owners of the estate and get all the money. I have to act like I knew nothing, although I was very aware of all the tricks that they wanted to play on me. I was just acting and buying time before I could make my own movie and teach them a good lesson. She bought me lots of gifts and acted very excited for my wedding with her younger son. Time was flying by, and I had to do a lot of things in a short time. If I wanted to get away from the venomous snakes I was surrounded by. As the wedding came near and nearer, I became even more aware and active, making sure that I would not allow them to play any tricks on me. Finally, the wedding day arrived, and everybody was gathered in the big grand hall. My mother-in-law was ready to make a fool of me, but instead of leaving me at the wedding hall, I left for the airport. I immediately called and told her that I need to cancel the wedding since I'm going to pretend that the woman was too stunned to speak. She started screaming, calling me names, and I could hear loud chatter behind her, getting everyone in the wedding hall stunned by my surprise move, checkmate. That was the last time I ever came in contact with her. After that, I just started my life again in Britain. I was living a far better life than I could ever imagine, and though the pain was still there, I miss my husband dearly, but now I'm able to start my business because of him. And after I sort everything out from Bulgaria, I was able to buy myself a nice house, start a good business, make myself independent while I was having a lavish life. I got to know that my mother-in-law and Noah were now on the streets, had nothing to eat because of their pettiness and bad behavior. Nobody was agreeing to let them stay at their house, nobody. Well, later on, I learned that Noah got involved in pretty much illegal activities, a gang, started doing drugs and other illegal activities, and eventually got captured. He was then sent to jail and had to live there for years, while my mother-in-law went to an old home. They were living like nobodies, with bare minimum on her hands. Karma hit her really bad, and they were having a messed up life, and whatever happened, we were just coming back to them, and I was going to live comfortably while they were rotting in the streets and begging for money. I was happy that way, since they've met the end that they deserve.
Yeah, this is one of those stories where I do not blame OP at all for setting up the story the way that she did. I mean, all the abuse, all the toxicness that she went through when her husband Chris passed away, and she had to deal with the nastiest mother-in-law and Noah, who was pretty much a creep. I want to know your thoughts about this story though, because yeah, some of the people can argue that what OP did towards the end of the story was a little too much, and she should have left them with something so they weren't homeless on the streets. But guys, you have to remember, they were going after OP, setting her up to marry the younger son Noah so they could literally rob her blind and take everything. So I want to know your thoughts on this story. Let's pretend we were in OP's position. Let me know in the comments down below what you would do if you were stuck in that crazy position. Guys, my name's Mr. Reddito. I want to thank you for joining me on today's story. If you enjoyed this sort of content, just know I drop a story every single day, and I also have multiple channels, so if you just can't get enough daily stories, check out my other channels directly below in the description section. Guys, I'll see you tomorrow, and just remember, it's cool to be kind. Peace.